Pope Francis mixes pastoral counsel with political persuasion in his historic address to Congress. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. Pope Francis is in New York right now, having finished his mission here in the nation's capital. That mission included the first papal address of its kind to lawmakers, and he used it to deliver a spiritual and political perspective on life from its beginnings to how and where it's lived and to its end. Correspondent Shannon Bream has the highlights.
Pope Francis made history today, becoming the first pontiff to address a joint meeting of Congress, touching on subjects from poverty to climate change and urging lawmakers not to look away from the millions of refugees flooding across Europe's borders, as well as immigrants streaming to America.
We need to avoid a common temptation nowadays to discard whatever proves troublesome.
And while he did not speak specifically about abortion, the Pope did emphasize the sanctity of life.
The Golden Rule also reminds us of our responsibility to protect and defend human life at every stage of its development.
Then followed up that statement by calling for an end to the death penalty. House Speaker John Boehner, a lifelong Catholic who invited the Pope to address Congress, was visibly emotional throughout the Capitol Hill visit, calling it a blessing, adding, "Let us all go forth with gratitude and reflect on how we can better serve one another." House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, also a Catholic, said of the Pope's speech, quote, "He challenged us to rescue our planet from the climate crisis that threatens the future of our children and the health of God's creation, and to do so sensitive to the needs of the poor." Instead of joining lawmakers for lunch, the Pope decided to serve others, blessing a meal for and meeting with hundreds at a center that serves needy Washington residents. Though he's had a jam-packed public schedule, a private meeting the Pope had late last night is getting plenty of attention, especially in light of these words from President Obama earlier on Wednesday.
Here in the United States, we cherish religious liberty.
The pontiff met with members of the Little Sisters of the Poor, who are engaged in a high-profile legal battle with the administration over its Obamacare mandate that employers provide cost-free access to various methods of birth control. The White House declined to speculate on whether the Pope intended for the meeting to send a message.
This particular case does illustrate the lengths to which this administration has gone to protect religious liberty, while at the same time protecting access to health care that millions of women rely upon.
As for how Little Sisters of the Poor viewed their meeting with the Pope, one of them put it very simply: "We were deeply moved by his encouraging words." Brett.
Shannon Bream up on Capitol Hill. Shannon, thank you. Let's get some analysis now of the Pope's message, his trip, from the Archbishop of Washington, Cardinal Donald Wuerl. Your Eminence, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Fred. It's good to be here with you.
We are now looking at live pictures of Pope Francis in New York, and I know when that, and there's the famous now Fiat that we've seen here in Washington and now in New York, and I know when that plane took off, it was probably a little exhale for you all here.
Yes, indeed. These have been 3 wonderful, wonderful days. Intense, wonderful, a blessing, and then it's nice to be able to know that the same blessing is going to move now around the country.
You know, you traveled very closely throughout this entire trip here in the nation's capital with Pope Francis. Was there a moment that caught you very close and you were riding even in the Pope-mobile?
I think one of those moments was, and again, in the Pope-mobile, is he's riding around and there are all these throngs of people cheering, and to see in his face the love for all of these people. He doesn't know them by name, but they're people who he cares for. And that one moment when he asked them to stop the Pope-mobile so that they could bring over this little baby, and he just hugged the baby and gave the baby a kiss. At that point, the mother, you can see her just dissolving in tears. Those are tender moments. Those are beautiful moments. I think another moment, though, that will stay etched in my memory and my heart is the gathering that out at the Basilica of the National Shrine, the Mass, to have 25,000 people quiet as he spoke, and then at the Mass itself, when he celebrated and raised the host and the chalice, to see this throng of people reverencing what was happening. I think they're in awe as much of him as the mystery that was unfolding.
Similar thing happened in the chamber, the House chamber, in that, it's obviously a political town. People take sides. He delivered a message on a number of different topics, but it seemed like, at least for this day, he transcended the politics of that place. I
think that's absolutely correct, because my appreciation of it, and I was privileged to be in the gallery to watch this, and as the Pope spoke, and it was a beautifully crafted talk that he gave, but there didn't seem to be division in the House. I watched when people got up to applaud, people on both sides of the aisle did that. When people remained seated and applauded, they applauded from both sides of the aisle. It struck me that they were hearing his message. Maybe we can find ways to listen to each other, and maybe we can find ways to work together.
We saw Secretary of State John Kerry escort Pope Francis to the plane there on the tarmac. He tweeted out, actually, pleased and moved by Pontifex's call to resolve disputes through diplomacy, address climate change, and protect the vulnerable in our world. Each side grasping onto something in this speech. Quickly, we noted that the U.S. Catholic bishops tweeted back, agree, John, at Pontifex reassures all of us that Catholic teachings have always treasured human life from its very beginning. So both sides, it seems, was there a wish by some that he would spend more time on abortion, considering what lawmakers had just been dealing with on Planned Parenthood and other issues?
Well, I think it was announced before he even came that this was going to be a pastoral presentation, that he would come as a pastor of souls, not as a politician, and not someone who would craft policy or public practice, but rather call us to the best of our principles. And so we hear that almost a mantra. He keeps reminding us, at the heart of everything is the human person, calling upon us to remember our own early foundations, the Constitution. We're a people who recognize the dignity of every single person, and that's from the beginning to the end of human life. But then he goes on to say we have to be able to work to the development of each of those persons.
Quickly, we see him meeting with homeless people at the Catholic Charities event. He chose to do that instead of having lunch with lawmakers on Capitol Hill. This is the year of mercy. That is the message, the service to others that he really is going to take around?
I think we're going to hear that over and over and over again. We're supposed to love God and love our neighbor, and the way we show our love for our neighbor is to care for those in need. He walked through that entire tent, visited all those people. Before that, he had visited the homeless inside the church. He's saying to us, if you are going to build a better world, then you need to start with the marginalized, those most in need.
Your Eminence, thank you much for the time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Brett.
More than 700 people are dead. Horrible story after a horrific stampede on the outskirts of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. It happened during the annual Hajj pilgrimage and appears to have been caused by two waves of pilgrims meeting at an intersection. Officials say almost 900 other people were hurt in the crush. More news here. A horrible accident between a charter bus and amphibious tour vehicle has left at least 4 people dead in Seattle, dozens others injured. The crash between the bus and the military-style duck boat occurred on a bridge over Lake Union this morning. Let's turn to the markets now. Stocks were off today. The Dow lost 79. The S&P 500 was down 6.5. The Nasdaq fell 18. Meantime, Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen said again today she believes interest rates will rise this year. Turning to news here in the U.S. Capitol, tonight another look at the relationship between perception and reality concerning the war against ISIS. There are new questions about the reliability and accuracy of some of the information coming out of the intelligence community. Correspondent Kevin Corke has specifics tonight from the White House.
Inspectors General, including those from the Pentagon and U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, are looking into allegations that analysis provided to the White House included rosier assessments of the situation in Iraq than actually existed, leading to new concerns that intel tampering may not only predate the rise of ISIS, it could be clouding the view of ongoing efforts in the Middle East. In its report, the New York Times cites analyst Gregory Hooker as having criticized the Bush administration for its, quote, amateurish and unrealistic plans for the invasion of Iraq. The article calls into question whether assessments are still politically skewed, particularly those critical of the current effort against ISIS in Syria and Iraq.
The president holds the intelligence community to a very high standard because of the importance of their work. But I can also say that the work that is done by the intelligence community is work that the president deeply appreciates and has a lot of confidence in.
Some on Capitol Hill, however, are far less confident, especially after a whistleblower suggested to lawmakers that analysts cook the books to make things seem better for political reasons.
And if in fact the intelligence is being manipulated for political reasons, not only should people be fired, potentially people should be prosecuted. They're doing an incredible disservice to the country.
Experts say it's up to the Obama administration to do its due diligence to avoid acting on bad intel.
It's the job of the president, the national security advisor, and the director of national intelligence to double check that all that information that's reaching the president is accurate, whether or not it's what he wants to hear.
We should learn even more next week when the whistleblower once again returns to Capitol Hill. Brett?
Kevin Corke live on the North Lawn. Kevin, thank you. Jeb Bush on keeping up with Donald Trump and the political messages from Pope Francis. That's next on Special Report.